Bonjour tout le monde! Here is your night before news video for paper 4 writing in French, and this is for the foundation tier. Make sure you have a pen and paper ready to take notes, and remember you can pause the video at any time. When you receive the writing paper, it will look like this, and key information about the test can be found on the front. The test is 1 hour 15 minutes. And it is made up of the following questions. Question 1 is a photo card. Question 2 is a 40 to 50 word question. Question 3 is an 80 to 90 word question and is probably the most challenging one on the foundation paper because it is also the same as question 1 on the higher paper. And question 4 is translation into French. So first let's think about what we can do to get ready before the exam starts. Before you actually begin the exam, you should read the information on the front of the paper. Notice it reminds you that there are 4 questions that you have to answer. Sometimes people forget about question 4 because it might be on the back of the paper. For questions 2 and 3, you have options. So you either answer 2A or 2B. You either answer 3A or 3B. If you accidentally answer both of the questions, the examiner will only mark the first question. So for example, if you answer question 2A and 2B, the examiner will only mark question 2A. So make sure you only choose one question to answer. Question 4 is a translation. You should spend about 10 minutes on this question. Don't forget about it. When they were designing the foundation writing paper, the examiners made a point of making it build up in difficulty level from question 1 to question 3. I like to compare it to getting ready to play an important match. Question 1 is like doing your stretches. It's not very difficult, but you would do it just to make sure you're in the right mindset. Question 2 is like taking a short walk to get yourself moving. You shouldn't be using all your energy on question 2. You should just be writing very quick, short answers in order to prepare for the big activity, which is question 3. Question 3 is your final match itself. And remember, question 3 on foundation is the same as question 1 on higher. This is where you really need to show off and you need to put all of your best phrases and all of your energy into question 3. On the next few slides, I will show you how to score full marks on the photo description. This is question 1, so it's quite an easy task, like stretching before you do any sports. Question 1, the photo card looks like this. It will have a photo at the top of the page and it will have space to write 4 sentences underneath. Each sentence is worth 2 marks. To score both of the marks, your sentence needs to include a verb and needs to make sense. The total amount of marks available will be 8 marks. This should be 8 easy marks for you. Remember, it is just like a warm-up at the start of the test, and we recommend you spend 5 minutes completing it. Let's take a closer look now at the photo. Before you write any of your sentences, a good idea is to write the nouns that you can see around the photo. A noun is a person, place, or thing. Nouns in French will have un at the start, meaning a or an. So here I've written un enfant, a child. I might say une plage, a beach. Normally, if a noun ends in an e, you would say une. So for beach, because we have an e at the end of the word, we would put une with an e at the end of it. Whereas with child, it ends in a T, so we don't need to put E at the end of the un. Let's think of some other nouns that we could use to describe this photo. We could say un homme, a man, or we could be specific and say un père, a dad. We could say une fille, a girl. Because fille ends in E, un has to end in E as well. You will notice that an exception to this rule is the word for dad. That is because the word dad is masculine, and that's why we don't put an E on the end. But usually, if a word has an E on the end, then you have to add an E to the word un as well. You might know some more advanced vocabulary, like the word for picnic, or maybe the word for tent. If you know this, you can include it. However, as you can see, I've already got more than 4 nouns that I'm definitely sure of, so it's safer to go for your certain options than to try to make up a word that you might not know. Because this should be a very easy warm-up question and a very easy way to get 8 marks, play it really safe. When we're writing sentences about the photo, we will always start with il y a. Il y a means there is or there are. As we previously discussed, you have to put un to say a or an, and if your word ends in E, you would usually say une fille, une femme, a girl, a woman. Notice that an exception to this rule is homme, because it is describing a masculine word. If you can see more than one of something, a good idea would be to write the number like deux or trois. But remember to put an S at the end of the next word. So if you're saying that there are 2 people in the photo, deux personnes with an S at the end. If you want to say 2 young people, deux jeunes with an S at the end. If you don't know how to say the number, you can use beaucoup de, lots of, but don't forget to put an S at the end of whatever you're describing. You can pause the video now and practice making some sentences of your own. Have a look through the photos on your phone. Can you describe them in French? Can you give 4 very simple ways of describing them, 4 very simple sentences? So let's have a look at this photo. If I wanted to describe it and get full marks, so let's have a go at describing this photo. If you feel confident that you can do this already, pause now, write your answer, and then you can check it with me later. If you're not confident, then follow along with me and you can try one by yourself later on. To begin with, I can quickly fill out il y a, il y a, il y a, il y a for all of the sentences, because all of my sentences will start with there is, there is, there is, there is. And now I just need to pick my 4 most confident, strongest nouns from the previous activity. So I'm going to say il y a une plage, there is a beach, and I'm remembering that beach ends in E, so un is going to have an E as well. Il y a un père, there is a dad. This one's a bit of a strange one because even though it ends in E, we know that the word dad is a masculine word, so we're not going to add an E to un. Il y a une mère, so a feminine word, and it does end in E. Il y a 3 enfants. So because there's more than one child, I'm putting an S on the word enfant to show that it's plural. This answer will give me 8 out of 8 marks. Now, do you see why I said it's just a very simple warm-up activity? If I show you the mark scheme, you will be able to see why this answer will score 8 out of 8. Each sentence is marked out of 2. To get 2 marks, you need to include relevant information, so that means information about the photo that is true, and you need to clearly communicate in a sentence. So I've said there is a beach. That's relevant information that's clearly communicated. For people who only get 1 mark for the sentence, it might be because they've put something that's not relevant about the photo. So maybe if I wrote in the photo there is a teacher, we don't know if there's a teacher in that photo, so it might not be true. The other reason why people might not get 2 marks is because maybe they forget to put il y a. So if I just wrote une plage, then I haven't really communicated in a sentence, so I would lose a mark. You might have a photo that doesn't have many people in it, and then you might get stuck thinking, there are not many nouns in the photo, what else can I say? You could also use structures like this. The man is happy, tall, small. The man is wearing some trousers, a jumper. Pause now, find a photo on your phone and practice using these sentences to describe it. Here is a new photo. Let's see whether you can score 8 marks. Pause the video now and write your answer. Here is a model answer that I have prepared. For this one, I've done 3 il y a sentences, but then I was getting a bit bored, so for my final sentence I've gone for la fille because I'm going to describe one of the girls. For my first sentence I've put il y a une fille, there is a girl. For my second sentence, il y a un parc, there is a park. For my third sentence, il y a 3 amis, there are 3 friends, and I've made sure that I've put an S on ami. And for my final sentence, la fille est contente, the girl is happy. And I've made sure, because fille is a feminine word, and I know because it's got an E on the end here, I've made sure that I've put an E on the end of happy. You might have written different sentences to me, and you might still get 8 marks, as long as your sentence has a verb in it and makes sense and actually describes what's in the photo. Remember, you can practice photo description anytime you see a photo. You can look through the photos on your phone and practice describing them. Have a go sometime. This should be an easy 8 marks for you. Question 1, the photo description, is like stretching before doing some physical activity. So question 2, the 40 to 50 word task, is like going on a short walk just to get warmed up before your big match. Let's see how you can get full marks on question 2, the 40 to 50 word task. You have a choice between 2 topics. This is to give you a fair chance to write about something that you know enough vocabulary for. So before you begin, have a look at both of the questions and choose one that you know the most words for. Read the bullet points carefully and think about what you could write for each one. Think about what vocabulary you actually need. Are you confident with that vocabulary in French? Choose a question that will be the easiest for you to write about. Once you've chosen your best option, don't forget to put a cross in the box for that question. And don't accidentally write answers to both of the questions, because the examiner will only mark the first answer they find. So if you answer both, they will mark 2A, even if 2B is better. When you look at the bullet points, hopefully you will notice that they follow a similar pattern. Bullet point 1 in question 2 is always about you describing something. So here you have either a description of where the cafe is or a description of what your phone looks like. So if you can easily think of words like the cafe is next to the shop, then you should go for the first one. However, if it's easier for you to think of words like my phone is big and the colour of your phone, then you should go for option B. Have a look at the second bullet point. For 2A, it's an opinion about food. For 2B, it's also an opinion, but this time it's about your phone. Again, think of what it will be easier for you to write about. When you look at bullet point 3, you will notice that it has the word will in both of them. You can either write when you will next visit the cafe or how you will use it, so your phone, this weekend. This is looking for your knowledge of the future tense. For foundation question 2, you do not need to include the past tense. So there are two really important things to include: opinions and future tense. And it's only 40 to 50 words. So you don't really have to put a lot of energy into this question, but you do need to make sure that you answer all of the bullet points. So in the exam, you would spend about 20 minutes on question 2. Pause the video now and decide whether you would go for 2A or 2B if this was your choice. And now we can start writing our answer to question 2. But wait, don't just rush into your answer without thinking it through properly. In some exams, like science for physics, they give you a table with all the important equations that you will need to complete the paper. Unfortunately for French, you won't get given this, but there's no one that will stop you from creating this on your paper. So once you've chosen the question that you would like to answer, imagine it might be 2B, you can go back to the blank page at the end of 2A. And this is where you're going to create your equation sheet. You won't need equations for French, but you will need important phrases, such as linking words, opinions, timeframes or structures, or lots as we call them, how to form the past tense in lots of different ways, and how to form the future tense. Remember that for question 2, you don't need the past tense, you only need the future, but we will need the past tense later on for question 3. The really nice thing about this equation page is that you could prepare it now and you could practice writing it out a lot at home and then use it in your real exam. A good equation page should have some examples of lots phrases, so linking words, opinions, timeframes and structures. Lots of different ways to form the past tense. These are all the different ones that we always practice during the register. And lots of different ways to form the future tense. Again, these are the ones that we've been practicing every lesson in the register. Let's have a closer look at lots. So some examples of linking words are aussi, also, pourtant, which means yet or however, mais, meaning but, ou with an accent, which means where. Remember, if you forget the accent, it means or, so make sure you use the accent if you want to say where. For example, in phrases like où on peut, where you can. And qui, for if you want to make a relative clause like qui s'appelle or qui est très sympa. Opinion phrases, you've got the basic ones like j'adore and j'aime, but you could also learn things like ma passion est, my passion is, or something more exciting like ça me stresse, that stresses me out, or quelle barbe, how boring. The examiners love to read exciting phrases like this because they stand out from the majority of students who are playing it safe. T is for time frames. Things like souvent, meaning often, d'habitude, meaning usually, tous les jours, every day, And then you've got the past tense one, hier, which means yesterday, or the future tense, demain, which means tomorrow. Structures could be any of the exciting high-level structures that you've learnt. Some ones that I really like are the ones that use infinitives, because when you're using an infinitive, you don't have to worry about changing the verb ending. So some really good ones are je viens de, I just, for example, je viens de manger, I just ate. Je viens de visiter, I just visited. So this is a really easy one to use. J'ai l'intention de, I intend to. J'ai l'intention de voyager, I intend to travel. J'ai décidé de, I decided to. This one's good because it counts as past tense. J'ai décidé de visiter ma mère. I decided to visit my mum. Pour que je puisse. That's a very high level phrase. If you use that on the foundation paper, the examiner will think that you're a higher student. So make sure you use things like that because you want to show the examiner that you're aiming for the top grade. And again, it's very easy to use because you just put an infinitive after it. So you need to make sure that the word that goes after it ends in ER, IR or RE. J'ai besoin de, I need to. J'ai besoin de trouver un travail. I need to find a job. And finally, the structure that we've been practicing a lot in class, j'y vais, I go there. This again is more of an A-level phrase. So if you can use it in foundation, you're showing the examiner that you're really someone who is aiming for the highest grade. Take some time to pause and practice writing out some of the structures from my equation page. You can swap some for your favourite ones if you prefer. The important thing is that you can write these from memory. So practice writing out an equation page that you like and then practice look, cover, write, check until you can write it from memory. Once you've prepared your equation sheet, you can go back to the actual question. We're imagining that you've chosen question 2A. Remember, the first bullet point is normally a description, the second bullet point is normally an opinion, and the third bullet point is normally the future tense. It's really important that you actually answer the bullet point. Some pupils get so carried away with using their structures that they forget to actually write about what the bullet point wants you to write about. So for example, for bullet point 3, if you start saying that you would like to go to France because you really love French food, it doesn't tell us when you will next visit the cafe. So what we need to do is write a little plan for what we want to include in each bullet point. What we're going to do is annotate each bullet point with ideas about what we could write before we actually write it. Our equation sheet gives us lots of generic phrases that we could use in the writing, but we need to make sure that we adapt our writing to answer the question. So we need to look at the key words and make a plan. So for this question, we need to say where a cafe is. Remember, if you have no idea how to answer this, it might be better to do question 2B instead of question 2A. However, I do know how to answer this, so I'm going to put phrases like se trouve, which means is found, like the cafe is found over here. If I didn't know this, because it's quite a fancy expression, I could just put is. That's why I've put there as well. And then we've got près de, which means next to. Once I've got my key words, I can start to plan out an answer for the bullet point. So I've got le café vit près de et se trouve. Some pupils like to write their answer around the bullet points or above the bullet points if you've got small handwriting. Some pupils like to write out notes just at the top of the question. Remember, if you don't want the examiner to mark it, you need to cross it out. Otherwise, they might think that that's your final answer. For the opinion phrase, I could put something like j'adore, and because it's about food, I'm going to put délicieuse. I've put SE at the end instead of X because I know that the word for food is feminine. Again, I can start to plan it out. La nourriture, the food, délicieuse, feminine version of delicious, parce que, because I want to give a reason why. For the last one, when you're using the future tense, there's lots of ways you can do it, as we saw on the equation sheet. You can say je vais with an infinitive. You can even say a structure like j'ai l'intention de, I intend to, again with an infinitive. Je voudrais with an infinitive. Je veux, which means I want, with an infinitive. So you've got loads of choice. Go with the one that you feel most confident on. And I'll just plan out a sentence here. So I'm going to use je vais, and I want to use demain because it means tomorrow, and something to do with a birthday because I think that will be quite an easy answer for me to write. When we look at the mark scheme for question 2, the 40 to 50 word question, you will see that it's actually quite easy to get the top marks. However, you've got to make sure that you write about all 3 bullet points, and you've got to actually answer the question that the bullet points are asking you. So make sure you pick the option that allows you to answer the most bullet points, even if that subject might be more of a boring subject. You've got to develop your ideas, so you can't just write one short sentence for each. You've got to put reasons why. You need variety in your vocabulary, and you need to use variety in your grammar structures, which is why it will be really good to plan out an equation sheet, learn it off by heart, and then refer to it throughout the exam. You really don't want to just keep repeating yourself, because then you'll lose marks when it comes to variety. So if you know synonyms, for example, parce que, you might know that it means car as well, switch it up. Make sure you're using simple connectives, even something like and or but, to link your sentences. And remember, don't show what you don't know. Don't try to write a really complicated sentence that you've thought of in English. It's better to think about what you actually know in French and build your sentences out of that, like making a collage. If you were in art and you had lots of pictures that you'd cut out of a magazine to make a collage, you would only use those pictures. You wouldn't start to create new images or draw new images because that's not the task. It's exactly the same here. You need to write what you can using the French that you know. You're not going to learn any new French on the spot. Once you have all of your keywords and your plan ready, you can write a response. Remember, you must answer the bullet point. So I could put, le café se trouve dans un bâtiment près de la rivière. The cafe is found in a building near to the river. However, I think that quite a few pupils who are on foundation wouldn't know the phrase se trouve, so like is found. I think a lot of you would not know that. Wouldn't know the phrase un bâtiment, a building, and wouldn't know the phrase la rivière. So let's think of a more basic way that we could still get the marks. We could put, le café est au bord de la mer, près de la plage. The cafe is by the sea, next to the beach. Or even, le café est dans ma ville, près de mon collège. The cafe is in my town, next to my school. Remember, think of the collage. You're working with what you know. You're not going to suddenly learn some new French while you're writing this. Your mission is to make sentences that answer the bullet points using the French that you know. The examiner is looking to see the French that you know, not something new and made up. So you can pause the video here and you can try to write the rest of the answer to question 2A. Remember, you're aiming for 40 to 50 words. So if you manage to write about 20 words for each bullet point, that will actually be over the amount of words that you need. This isn't a big, difficult activity. This is your walking task. Photo description was stretching, and this is just like a nice, pleasant walk. It shouldn't be something that's too challenging. If one of the bullet points seems more difficult than the others, you can write a shorter response for that one, as long as you make sure that overall you have about 50 words. You are allowed to go over the word count. This will not cause any marks to be lost. If you go under the word count by a lot of words, for example, if you only wrote 10 words, this probably would have an effect on your grade, because it's likely that if you only wrote 10 words, it means that you haven't actually answered all the bullet points, or you haven't developed your answers. So pause the video now and see if you can get a good answer for question 2A. If you're stuck though, carry on watching and you can try 2B by yourself later. Hopefully you felt confident enough to have a go at question 2A. And if you did, then you can have a look at my model answer and compare it to yours. However, you might not feel confident enough yet, and that's fine as well. So you can have a look at me writing my model answer and then you can try 2B by yourself. When you write your answer, you need to pay attention to the word count of each paragraph. The paragraphs do not need to be equal in length, however, the overall answer needs to come to 40 to 50 words. It doesn't matter if it's slightly over or slightly under. You should write the word count down next to each paragraph to see if you need to go back and add anything extra. You can use your equation page and especially the lots phrases to add extra words. You must answer the bullet points in order and you must leave a line between each paragraph to help the examiner to really quickly see your answer. Here is my answer for bullet point 1, where the cafe is. I've written, the cafe is found in a building next to the river. This is 11 words. For bullet point 2, I've written, the food is delicious. I like the desserts because I love chocolate. And this gives me 12 words. For the final one, I must use the future tense. I've written, I intend to visit the cafe tomorrow with my family because it's the birthday of my mum. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to write my mum's birthday, but you cannot do this in French. You have to write the birthday of my mum, the birthday of my friend. And this is 16 words. So if we add this up, we are just under the word count. So we can now look for opportunities to add intensifiers or adjectives to increase it. For example, in sentence 1, where I put a building, I could change it to a modern building next to the river, and this will add an extra word. Remember, when you're describing things in French, the describing word often goes after the noun that you're describing. So you can see here I've put a building modern. However, if you're talking about sizes, like a large building or a small building, grand or petit goes before. In sentence 2, I could change it to say, the food is really delicious, instead of just, the food is delicious. If I do this, then I can improve my score and my word count. Here is question 2B. If you haven't already had a go at writing these by yourself, pause the video and see if you can get an answer for 2B now. Don't forget to write a plan first before you put everything into sentences. And when you finish putting it into sentences, don't forget to count up your words and have a look for opportunities to add in any extra. Once you've finished writing your answer, have a look at my model answer. So remember, we're paying attention to the word count, we're adding extra words if we don't have enough, and we're leaving a line between each paragraph to make it easier for the examiner to mark. So for what your phone looks like, I've put Mon portable est noir et moderne. My phone is black and modern. 6 words. Surely I can write a little bit extra. For the second one, I've put J'adore mon portable parce que c'est pratique et utile. I love my phone because it's convenient and useful. J'aime rester en contact avec mes amis sur les réseaux sociaux. I like to stay in contact with my friends on social media. So I felt more confident about the opinion than I did the description, so I've made up for the word count here by doing 20 words. And finally, ce week-end, je vais utiliser mon portable pour jouer à des jeux avec mon frère et prendre des photos de mon chien. This weekend I'm going to use, and I've made sure that after I've used je vais, I've used an infinitive, ER. I'm going to use my phone to play games with my brother and take photos of my dog. And again, for take photos, it's got to be an infinitive because I've used je vais. And this comes to 19 words. Let's now review the process that we've been practicing in order to be successful for question 2. You can pause the video after each step and have a go at it independently. The more times you practice this by yourself, the more confident you should feel in the exam. Step 1. Choose the best question for you. How do you know which question is best? Well, you read all the bullet points and you think to yourself, which question do I know the most vocabulary for? Step 2. Create your equation sheet. Your equation sheet should have lots phrases, so that's linking words, opinions, time frames and structures. It should have past tense. However, for question 2 you won't need the past tense, so if you want you can leave that until you're looking at question 3. And it should definitely have lots of different types of future tense because question 2 on foundation always asks you for the future tense. You can pause now and create an equation sheet from memory. Step 3 is to break down the question itself. This is where you have a look at the different bullet points and you circle the key words and you decide what words you will need to use in your answer. For example, for bullet point 2, you've got an opinion, so you would put j'adore. Step 3 is to create a mini plan. Some students have small handwriting, so they have space to plan this underneath the bullet point or above the bullet point. Some pupils like to plan this on the dotted line. However, make sure you cross it out so the examiner doesn't mark it. You can practice that now if you like to by pausing the video. And finally, you're ready to write your answer. You're making sure you leave a line between paragraphs and you're making sure that the total amount of words is 40 to 50. It doesn't matter if you go over. It doesn't matter if you're slightly under. If you're dramatically under, you probably haven't written enough. And your final stage is to review and check. So you should be checking that you've definitely answered the question, you've definitely included an opinion, you've definitely included future tense. A good trick is to include more than one opinion and more than one future tense sentence, because then if you've made a mistake on one of them, you've got some backup ones where you can still get the points. However, you shouldn't be spending all your energy on the 40 to 50 word task because the main event is yet to come with the question 3, which is longer, it's 80 to 90 words. So we've done our stretching, that was a picture description, very basic. We've done a nice little walk to get ourselves feeling a bit more confident. That was question 2, where all you needed to do was write an opinion and a future tense and keep it very simple. Now the big task for a foundation student is question 3. This is the match that we've been working up towards. It's 80 to 90 words and it's exactly the same as higher question 1. However, if you follow the same sort of routine that we've just been looking at for question 2, you should be able to be really successful in this question. The process for being successful at the 80 to 90 word question is very similar to being successful in the 40 to 50 word question. You start by choosing the question that will suit your French best. So you will have 3A and 3B. You need to have a look at the bullet points and you need to make a decision as to which one you will know the most vocabulary for. Remember that you need to be able to answer every bullet point. So if there's a really tricky bullet point, it's better to choose the other question. Step 2 is to break down the question itself. You should already have your equation sheet ready, so you don't need to do another one. Remember, breaking down the question means reading the bullet point and deciding what it's asking you for. It's probably asking you for an opinion, a past tense, or a future tense. Step 3 is where you plan the verbs and tenses that you want to use for each bullet point. Again, if you've got small handwriting, you can write this above or below the bullet point itself, or you can actually write it on the line, but that sometimes gets a bit messy and distracts from your actual answer. You could also just write it at the top of the page or on the page of the other question. So if you've chosen to do 3B, you could actually plan your answer on 3A. Just make sure you cross it out, because what you don't want to happen is for the examiner to think that you've answered that question and for you to get a really low mark. Then you want to plan out your key language features. In order to do really well on the 80 to 90 word question, you've got to show off more. The 40 to 50 word question has a very simple mark scheme. You've just got to keep it quite basic. The 80 to 90 word question, you need to show that you know some really nice language structures, like pour que je puisse, j'ai besoin de, j'ai décidé de, all of the structures that we looked at when we were making our equation page. Step 5, you're planning out the vocab and ideas that you want to use. So you're making sure that for each bullet point, you've got the right level of vocabulary. If you find that you're running out of answers, you might want to switch to the other question. Step 6 is where you actually commit to writing your answers. As you're going along, you should be counting up the words and making sure that you're going to hit 80 to 90 words. Remember that if one bullet point, you're not really sure about it, just write a short and simple answer, and then you can write more for the next bullet point. And step 7 is where you're reviewing and checking your answers. You absolutely need to make sure that your past tense is correct. Include more than one past tense so that if you make a mistake on one, you can still get the marks. You absolutely need to make sure that your future tense is correct. So include more than one future tense, so if you make a mistake, you've still got a chance of getting the marks. We suggest that you spend 20 to 25 minutes including planning on this task. Try not to spend longer than 30 minutes on the task because you risk missing out another question and that will cost you marks. Remember, in class when we practice this type of activity, we normally time ourselves 4 minutes per bullet point. If you're taking 20 to 25 minutes, you could take around 5 minutes per bullet point and then time to check. Here is an example of a question 3. 3A is about shopping and 3B is about transport. Don't just make your judgment on which one you want to write about based on the word shopping and transport. You need to read all of the bullet points and figure out which of the bullet points you would actually know the words for in French. Do that now, pause the video and make your choice. So hopefully now you've chosen between 3A and 3B. Remember that to get good marks on question 3, because it's the same as higher question 1, you need to develop your answers a lot more than you would in question 2, and you need to be more complex. So which one can you develop the most? Which one can you say the most about? Once you've chosen, don't forget to put a cross in the box for that question. Here is the mark scheme for question 3. As you can see, in order to get top marks in the first box, you need to actually answer all 4 bullet points. And you've got to frequently develop your ideas. So you cannot just write one really good paragraph and then some boring paragraphs. you've got to keep adding to your paragraphs and putting reasons why, justifying your opinions. You can make mistakes and still get good marks, as long as you're constantly trying to develop your bullet points. If you have a look at the box for linguistic knowledge and accuracy, they're really looking for variety of vocabulary and grammar structures. So this is where your equation sheet will be really useful. Concentrate on making sure you've got a great equation sheet that you can write off by heart so that you can use it throughout the exam. They're looking for the occasional bit of complex language. Complex language would be any of the structures that we wrote down as part of the lots during our equation sheet. So if you're not really sure, go back to that part of the video and choose some structures. You 100% need to use past tense and future tense to get into the top box. In fact, even to get 3 or 4 marks, you need to use at least 2 time frames. So that means that you need to get the present tense right, so this could be an opinion, but you also need to get the past tense right or the future tense right. Hopefully you will get past tense, future tense and opinions in your writing, and then you can get 5 out of 5 for this section. Remember that the best way to do it is to learn some past and future off by heart and write them down as part of your equation sheet. If you do this, you should easily get the marks. And don't just include one example of past and one example of future. Make sure you include about 3 examples of each, so if you do make a mistake, you can still get the marks. You need to avoid repetition. So try to learn a wide variety of ways to say good and bad, so that you're not always just putting fantastique, fantastique. Try to vary it and make sure you're using complex structures like the ones we spoke about earlier. Like with question 2, question 3 also follows a structure. It will usually have a description first, followed by an opinion, followed by past tense, which is not included in question 2, and another future tense. And they will try to keep the same structure for every question. However, do make sure you read it just in case there's any changes. Once you've decided what each bullet point needs, you can then start annotating as we did with question 2. So for example, you can start to write some keywords, like you might write some modes of transport next to the first bullet point, some opinions next to the second bullet point, some past tense phrases with the third bullet point, and some future tense for the 4th bullet point. Once I know what each bullet point is actually testing me on, so description, opinion, past and future, I can have a look back at my equation sheet and I can start to select phrases that will help me to answer each bullet point and write them above the bullet point, below the bullet point, or at the top of the page, wherever suits you. As the 80 to 90 word question should be more of a challenge, and as it's looking for more complex language and more developed answers, instead of just using lots, I can use quack notes. So quack notes are qualifiers, adjectives, connectives, negatives, opinions, timeframes and structures. This is more advanced language that I want to bring into question 3 to make sure I'm reaching the top brackets of the mark scheme. Pause the video now and choose your favourite of all the quack notes and make a little list so that you can practice writing them off by heart at home before the exam. So as we mentioned previously, you can start to plan your answer underneath the bullet point if you've got very small handwriting, or above the bullet point. So for this one, public transport, I've just listed the countryside, la campagne, les transports en commun, public transport, il y a, there is, peu de, not a lot of, and le train, the train. For my opinion of public transport with reasons, I've chosen to go for j'aime voyager, I like to travel. Le bus, the bus. Long, le trajet est long. Le voyage. And then I might try and use something like a comparative. So here I'm putting less something than. So I might put like it's less expensive than this, or it's not as fast, it's less fast than. I know that sounds weird in English, but in French it sounds good. For bullet point 3, I've started to put down the past tense I want to use. I want to use je suis allé because I feel really confident about using that one. And where I will go this summer, I'm going to use je vais aller. I'm going to go. Now remember, my advice to you is to not just use one example of past tense and one example of future tense, because then if you make a mistake, you're really stuck on the mark scheme and the examiner will have to give you a lower mark. If you use more than one example, hopefully you would get one of those examples right and the examiners can give you the marks. If you're feeling quite confident, this would be a great time to pause and try to write the answer for yourself. However, if you're not so confident, carry on watching. So let's take a look at a model answer for this question. For the first bullet point, this model answer says, J'habite à la campagne, il y a peu de transport en commun. I live in the countryside and there's not a lot of public transport. Il y a seulement un train par jour ici. There's only one train per day here. Et il faut réserver en avance. And you must reserve in advance. This comes to 28 words. So that's slightly over. If we're saying we're aiming for 20 words per bullet point to get to 80, I've gone slightly over, which is pretty good here, because it means that I can hold back maybe on some of the other bullet points if I'm struggling with those. So for the second one, my opinion of public transport with reasons, I've put Je préfère voyager en bus. I prefer to travel by bus. Parce qu'on peut regarder par la fenêtre. Because we can look out of the window, you can see what's going on. Par contre, les voyages en bus sont plus longs que les voyages en métro. On the other hand, journeys by bus are longer than journeys in the metro. So it's always good to give the pros and the cons, the advantages and the disadvantages, because often that's what this kind of question wants you to do. Bullet point 3 has to use past tense. So I've put la semaine dernière, last week. Je suis allé, I went au collège en voiture parce que j'ai manqué le car, because I missed the coach. So I've done 2 different types of past tense, so even if I make a mistake, hopefully I can still get the marks. I haven't written as much for that one. I personally think that knowing what you are like as students, you will have more to write for past and future tense than you will for the other bullet points. So that's why I've given longer examples here for the first 2 bullet points. And finally, for the future tense, cet été, je vais aller, I'm going to go, chez mes grands-parents avant d'aller en France. Je voudrais acheter, I would like to buy, des souvenirs pour mes amis. So this summer I'm going to go to my grandparents' house before going to France. I would like to buy some souvenirs for my friends. So again, I've given myself 2 chances to get the mark just in case I make a mistake. So that's the routine for the 80 to 90 word question. You start by choosing the question. You then break it down into what the bullet points are actually asking you. Is it a description? Is it past tense? Is it future tense? Is it opinion? Is it pros and cons? Then you plan out the verbs and tenses that you want to use using your equation page. You plan out the key language features like the quack knots that you want to use. And you start to plan your vocab and ideas underneath the bullet points. When you've finished planning, you're ready to go, you're ready to write your answers, you're aiming for about 20 words per bullet point. And when you're done, you review and check. What do you actually do in the checking time? Well, first you have a look at the tenses. I would always think to yourself, have I included an opinion? And I would pick up your pen and touch the opinion that you've included, just to force yourself to do it and force yourself to recognise there's my opinion. Have I actually included more than one past tense? Again, pick up your pen and tap where you've put your different past tenses so you can see for yourself that you've included it. Have you included a future tense pick up your pen and tap the future tenses. Obviously not really loud because you are in an exam and you don't want to distract other people, but it's just about having something to do that draws your attention to where you've included those points, because that's where all the marks are. Previously, you might have been held back on a low mark, not because your French wasn't very good, but because you forgot to include the past tense. So it's really important that you make sure you have routines for checking this. Always check your accents. If you've got Jay-Z for past tense, Beyonce should be there. The Beyonce accent needs to be traveling in the right direction. So the direction is this way. So if we've got an E, I know this is really exaggerated. The accent is going that way, okay? And adjective agreements, so if you're saying the lady is tall, then the word tall has to have an E on it. Check things like that. And check to yourself, does it actually make sense? Read it back. Have you actually written what you wanted to write? Have you just been thinking in English and translating it? Or have you been thinking about the French that you know and writing something based on the French that you know? A good idea right now, if you haven't already, is to pause the video and have a go at taking yourself through these steps for question 3 and seeing what you come out with. The final question, question 4, is translation into French. You must not forget about this one. Some pupils miss it because it's at the back of the paper. But make sure that you don't, because you'll be missing some very easy marks. We suggest you take about 10 minutes on this. It's worth 10 marks. So you have to look at the sentences and translate them into French. This is kind of a grammar exercise because the examiners are trying to see if you can spot where they've put an opinion, if you can spot where they've put past tense, and they're trying to see how you're going to deal with that. So if we look at the first one, we've got I love school. It seems pretty basic. However, remember in French, they will say I love the school. That's what it means when it says don't forget the article. The article is the word the. Now, in order to get the right word for the, you've got to think about whether school is going to be masculine or feminine. Because if it's masculine, you're going to put le with an E, and if it's feminine, you're going to put la. For the second one, if you're going to say my favourite subject, is it going to be directly translated? So the word for my, the word for favourite, the word for subject. Think about the word order in French. If you're using an adjective, like the white cat, do you still say the white cat in French, or do you swap things around? Is the word subject masculine or feminine? Because that's going to change how you say the word my. Think about how you say my dad compared to how you say my mum. It changes, or my friends. For the third one, again, we need to think about adjective agreement. If the teacher is feminine, then the word interesting will have an E on the end. For the fourth one, we've got a word that ends in ed, so we need to think about past tense, and we need to think about the classic structure of Jay-Z and Beyonce when we're writing this verb. We also need to talk about the preposition at home. Think about how you would say at my house. How would you translate the at? For the final one, you've got the word well and you've got the word good. They're kind of similar, but they're different in English and different in French. And well is quite an irregular word. It's quite difficult to translate. You've also got what we call a modal verb, I can. So you've got to think about how to say that. And you've got an infinitive. Remember that we said that some adjectives, normally adjectives go after the word they're describing, but some adjectives, and we call them bags adjectives, go before. So bags stands for beauty, age, goodness or size. These types of words go before. So previously in the video we mentioned a tall man is un grand homme, and the word grande goes before. So that's something we need to watch out for. Pause this video now and have a go at this translation. Top tips for the translation: make sure you attempt everything. If you're unsure of a word, see if you can find a way around it. Can you describe it? Can you think of a synonym? Don't translate word by word. So for the first one, don't think to yourself, how do I say I? Oh, it's je. How do I say love? Don't think like that. Think about grammar and think about structures that you've been taught in class. If you can think of a similar sentence, you might be able to swap some words around and get to the right answer. Hopefully you've had a go at this by yourself, but if not, let's have a look at the answers together. You can always pause after each one and have a go by yourself. So, I love school, j'adore le collège. The biggest mistake that pupils will make here is that they'll forget the le. So if you have an opinion sentence, make sure you don't forget the article. You could also have put j'adore l'école, like L''E'. My favourite subject is history. Ma matière préférée, c'est l'histoire. So the favourite has to go after the word subject in French because it's an adjective that's describing the subject. Again, we've got the le in front of l'histoire, like how we've got the le in front of collège. For C, we've got le or la prof est intéressant. Remember, if you decided to make the teacher feminine, you would have to put an E on interesting. And we've got j'apprends. J'apprends means I learn, and beaucoup, a lot. Last year, I studied Jay-Z and Beyoncé. Both of them are there, so we know we will get the marks. Tous les soirs, every evening. Chez moi, at my house. If I work well, I can find a job. Si je travaille bien, so bien meaning well. Je peux trouver, so je peux is a modal verb, it means I can. Trouver une bonne, a good emploi. That's why we say bonjour, because it's good day, or bonsoir, good evening. Just some final words on how to proofread your paper before ending this video. Hopefully you would have about 10 minutes at the end of your exam to proofread everything. This is really important because it's very easy to make a silly mistake, and if that silly mistake is on your past tense or your future tense, it could lose you a lot of marks. So they're the areas that you really need to be looking at, your tenses and making sure you've included opinions. Just a little checklist to help you think about what to proofread. Number 1, have you definitely answered the bullet points? Have you answered them in order? If you cannot find your answer to a bullet point, the examiner won't be able to and you won't get the marks. Have you met the word count? Remember, you can go slightly over, that's fine, but are you roughly in the right area? If you're slightly under, can you think of any adjectives or intensifiers that you can add? Can you just throw in an opinion just for some extra marks? Number 3, this is so important. Are your tenses accurate? Have you tried at least 3 past tenses and 3 future tenses just in case you make a mistake? If you haven't, add some in at the end. Number 4, are your adjectives agreeing with the nouns that they're describing? So if you're using a feminine word, have you added an E? For example, to the word petite, have you added an E to the end? Small words, words like a or on or o, have you used them correctly? Check any small words, or check anywhere where you've got words where 2 vowels are next to each other and you might be able to contract them, squash them together. Are your spellings good? If you're not sure about the spelling of a word, can you swap it for a different word? And have you included a variety of quack knots? If you check all of these and you're pretty satisfied that you've done all of it, you should be looking at a really good mark for this paper. So that's everything I can tell you about the writing foundation paper in French. Remember, the timing is 1 hour 15 and it will take you 1 hour 15. if you are doing a thorough job, if you are doing your equation page with lots of detail, if you are proofreading and checking that you've put 3 different past tenses, 3 different future tenses, if you've added in extra adjectives, extra intensifiers to make sure you've met the word count. Remember, you need to answer 4 questions. Question 1 is a photo card. Question 2, you have a choice and it's 40 to 50 words. It's still quite basic, really. Question 3 is the big question for you. It's 80 to 90 words. It needs past tense, it needs future tense, it needs opinions. And do not forget about question 4, the translation. Often it's a little bit hidden at the back of the paper. If you haven't got 4 different questions completed, then you haven't finished your test. So give it a good go. You can go back and watch any parts of this video that you found particularly difficult. If you've got any questions, as always, come and speak to me, send me an email. I'm really happy to help. If you want to write some practice questions and send them to me to mark, that's fine as well. I'll be really pleased to help you with that. But overall, I think my most important message here is learn opinions, learn past tense, learn future tense, practice writing them out from memory, so that you know as soon as you get into that exam, you can create your own equation page from memory that you can keep going back and checking. That's the most important and useful thing that you can take away from this, really. Alors, bon courage, au revoir.